Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Avatar video. This will be my next Legacy of Yangchen chapter analysis video. This one will be for chapter 17, Baited. So this is the chapter where we go to last night from the previous chapter to explain what just happened in the previous chapter. Now I already kind of caught you up to speed a little bit with it when I did the last chapter, but that's kind of what we do here. It's like, okay, Yangchen planning with the team. How do they come to the conclusion that they need to go and do this gambling game with Zongdu Iwashi while the others go on a stealth mission to his ship? Well, we get that all explained here, along with getting up to the point where we're roughly at the point where we're about to have the game actually happen. But still, it's a long sequence of chapters here, so it'll be a little bit before we properly kind of get through everything. But anyway, yeah, interesting chapter here, and there is some very good Yangchen and Kavik dynamics throughout this whole thing. Both them sort of like acting together, of course, because Kavik is Master Leo throughout all of this, but also, representing their actual dynamic together as well. So we start off last night immediately, so flashback. And her report to her team is basically, look, we have 6 days before the world leaders arrive. We need to figure out, where Thapa is before then. That is the time limit on everything that we are doing. And obviously the idea is they are trying to find one person who effectively could be almost anywhere in the world. Now, they obviously know maybe he can't be certain places because he still has to be able to get to Taku in time himself. But, they just have no idea where he could possibly be right now. It's just like finding a needle in a haystack, basically. Taigum asked, what about the heads of state? Have you find any way to maybe, have them turn back and not get involved? No. And as we know from Kavik trying to kind of negotiate with the White Lotus, they also don't want this to happen because they view it as kind of getting in the way of like what they could potentially accomplish, and they don't mind to a certain degree putting the world leaders at risk. So Jujinta is like, okay, so if we can't like defend in that way, then we probably have to go on the attack and just find some way to lure him out or really, locate where he is. So they're like, stealing information from Chai Si is not going to be easy. So what if we go through, how she likely has organized things herself, which is doing preparations through an intermediary, which is likely going to be Zongdu Iwashi. From her perspective, Iwashi is the ideal agent. He can set up any arrangements she might need in Taku, and she can demand the favor in a face-to-face talk without having to create a written trail leading back to her. So this is how we are going to do it. And they kind of note like, wait, how much of a softer target is Iwashi compared to Chai Si? And she's like, it'll be like scoring on an empty hoop. I guarantee it. And we obviously know it hasn't gone quite so well, but she's very confident going in. One other kind of interesting note here is about Yangchen's tea, which will come back later on in terms of kind of the reveal about this. But yeah, she drank her tea in gulps. The others had their own cups. She had laced hers with leaves used in the special brew that visitors to the Spirit Oasis drank. Whether she was allowed to have it outside of the ritual was a grey area. So this is the thing that we got obviously from the earlier chapters, which I think she drank right before she went into the spirit world back in like chapter 4. She's continuing to drink this stuff even out here. And obviously this is this kind of spiritual kind of energy boosting drink that she seems to just drink regularly now, and we'll come back to this again later as well. But anyway, then we get to the idea of, okay, this is how we are going to target Iwashi. He has many great loves: Kakata cricket fighting, penjing gardening, sailing, and especially sailing. And this is where we get the idea of the significance of his ship. He likes it so much, especially during this time of year, that he will often do most of his work on that boat out at sea. So the Bliss Eternal is the name of his ship, of course. There's probably some very key documents on that ship, including whatever dealings he has done recently with Chai-Si, which probably relate to organizational stuff around Project Unanimity. So that's kind of what they're going for here. But they have to find a way to kind of get aboard this ship secretly, in the middle of all this stuff happening. And of course there's a lot of security around, and he tends to be on it quite a lot, so the only kind of window is probably going to have to be during the meeting of Zongdu's prior to like the world leaders arriving. That's how it's going to have to happen. So we have to reach it before before Iwashi himself reaches the docks. And Kavik's like, whoa, you've been preparing for this for a long time. And she notes, whoever starts playing the game first wins. Are you surprised? But then we get to his other big hobby, the one that we're really going to work with here. The sailing, yes, that's one part of it. But the other thing, how we will distract him, is Sparrow Bones. He is super into Sparrow Bones. In general, he kind of likes gambling, but Sparrow Bones is the thing that he super cares about and is always looking for someone who will be a challenge in a game. And this might be one of the only things that will keep him from immediately heading out for his ship after a meeting. And Yangchen is just like, I know how to play, I'm okay, but I don't think I'll be able to kind of distract him for long enough, at least on my own. So which one of you is the best at Sparrow Bones? And of course, we sort of know already it's going to be Kavik, because he handled himself quite well when they first arrived in Jandari, in terms of, he didn't win a lot, but he didn't seek to win a lot. But the idea was that if that was the aim, he probably could have done pretty well, obviously. Then we cut to basically the plan already in action, because we're obviously meant to know already that it is Kavik. And of course, the previous chapter did reveal that to us as well. This is funny because you're almost like, wait, what's going on here? And you almost have to read the full chapter and then go back to kind of realize the extent of like what's actually happening here. It's hours later, Yangchen and Kavik snuck out of the safe house and made their way to one of the main avenues that spanned Taku. The plan required them to start their day in the Avatar's official lodgings. Moving as a pair through the side streets was much faster than going alone. They relaxed once the sounds of nightlife filled the air. And Yangchen, this is the kind of funny part, Yangchen grabbed Kavik's arm and tugged him along when he dawdled, broad grins on both of their faces. And they're doing this, like, giggling with each other, basically, out in the streets around everyone. Everyone can see them. And Yangchen's not in disguise here, so everyone is like, the Avatar is with a guest, just having a fun time at night in the streets. And they make a bit of a show about, they arrive at their guest house. A quick airspout elevated them both to the second-story window of her official quarters. They undid the latch with fumbling hands and tumbled through together. And then it's noted that they immediately dropped this kind of like giggling teenager thing the second they're inside and get straight back down to business. And so it immediately changes from the act they were putting on of kind of looking like a couple outside to normal kind of dynamics in here. And so they do a check, is there anyone spying directly here? Nope, nothing's going on here. And they're like, tomorrow's the big day. Are you sure Chai-Si isn't going to recognize you? So this is the big kind of danger going into this meeting when it comes to Kavik, is because of the whole Kalyan situation, and they're not super sure about what exactly the dynamic is, because he obviously betrayed Han She after he betrayed Chai-Si, but seems to now be working loyally for Chai-Si. So what's going on here? He has the information about Kavik, of course, but has he given it to Chai-Si? Does Chai-Si know who Kavik is? Or is he still basically undercover? Like, she just has no clue who he is. That's the big kind of mystery in all of this. And it comes down to, like, Yangchen kind of basically pointing out to Kavik, how much do you truly trust your brother? Do you trust him to have not kind of burned you in all of this? And he's like, yeah, what you really mean is, did my brother rat me out? Did he burn me? The answer is no. He'd have nothing to gain by it. And he does say as well, and he kind of makes it a little bit cutting here, I'm Kalyan's family, his blood. He'd never play games with my life the way you would. So this is this kind of supreme confidence that Kavik has in Kalyan, that because they are blood, he would never kind of risk Kavik's life, because the one thing that is sort of consistent with Kalyan is that he has saved him, and that is in line with what we got from before. He may have manipulated Kavik in the first book, but he did protect him, and it is noted here that, like, yeah, Kalyan seemingly facilitated him joining the association in Jondari, and then sent him basically on the same ship as Unanimity to Bin to kind of get out of the way and protect him. So this is the one kind of confident bit, even though Kavik has his doubts about his brother because his brother has changed so much. This isn't really something he questions too much, but there are some doubts, as we'll see a little bit kind of later. And there's an interesting point from Yangchen and kind of her kind of inner kind of dialogue about kind of how, in a way, harsh kind of Kavik was about that kind of approach. And she kind of thinks about, like, how, you know, wait, you're calling me out for playing games here with you? Is that what this is actually about? But then she realizes that, oh yeah, like the entire kind of basis of their kind of dynamic and him becoming the companion was very much kind of her forcing him into it the entire time. He's never truly volunteered exactly. And there's been moments when, like, they get on really well and he would make an ideal companion, but her kind of, in a way, lack of trust of him, it always sort of being a little bit like a business kind of transaction here of, you work for me, has always maybe gotten in the way of kind of some of the more trusting aspects of their dynamic. And she kind of thinks about how, like, oh, Avatar companions, like, always known throughout the eras as being willing to make a big sacrifice for their avatars. But it says here, but Kavik vexed her. How much could she really ask of him? How far could she push him in the name of service and still live with herself? She's kind of asking the kind of reverse kind of idea of, like, oftentimes it's a friendship where the companion is willing to do that, but because of the weird dynamic here, it's like, how much can she, like, ask of him to do that kind of resembles that? Because, in a way, of how she handled the betrayal at the end of the first book, and she kind of notes it here. You know, there was no exit now, their fates had been twined. She wished she hadn't spoken to him so harshly when they'd parted ways in Bin It had been satisfying to slap him across the face with the label of asset and deny him genuine companionhood, but lashing out at him hadn't been worth it. A little absolution back then might have led to an easier current state of affairs, Kavik giving of himself freely like a devoted friend, Yangchen responding with grace. Instead, the two of them had gone and made things complicated. So I like that because it highlights that is kind of where their relationship is. Yangchen is already sort of thinking about how she kind of wants things to be back more like they maybe were, or like they maybe could have been had things gone differently in the first book. And she's, in a way, a little bit regretting how she approached the betrayal. Obviously, it was a proper betrayal. Like, it needed to be addressed. It was a bad thing that he did. But did it need to be met with the level of response that she kind of gave him, which was kind of like cutting basically all contact and fully making him, you are only an asset, that's it. And she kind of thinks that, like, not really worth it in the long run because of the kind of complexities that it's creating now. Of, like, they're having moments where you can see it's kind of getting back to the old style, but then little moments like that where maybe they could talk more openly, he gets a little bit more defensive about it because he knows kind of the way their dynamic is, and that's just kind of interesting. But kind of immediately you see that this is followed up by something that, in a way, highlights the dynamic that she has with Kavik that is different than some of the other companions. And the idea that he says, you know, I think you should go to sleep first. The people you become, it's better if they have someone to talk to. And Yangchen's a little bit stunned because she's almost not used to, outside of, like, Jetson and people she super trusts at the temples and stuff like that, to kind of openly talk and help her through the kind of her gift, basically. And she wants to kind of feel angered and stuff like that, vulnerable, but it's not really there when it comes to Kavik knowing about it. She says here in the dialogue, narration actually, Kavik seemed to get a pass where Ayunarak didn't. And she's kind of like, are you sure you don't want to lie down first? But he's like, no, I need to go over some of the numbers first. And he asks about, like, oh, does he use Omashu style rules? And it's like, yes, Owashi does, because that's where he's from. So Owashi is originally from Omashu, and he's just like, good night, Avatar. And yeah, she just goes to bed at this point. And this is a little bit of a setup for later. And it is noted that she is comfortable around him. This is a kind of vulnerable situation for her. But him just sitting at the desk across the room, writing, it helps her go to sleep kind of peacefully. And we saw this happen already in the book. So I like the depth of this dynamic here, where, you know, I think they're kind of keeping up the idea of the betrayal here, but now they're addressing a little bit of the, in a way, was Yangchen a little harsh with how she handled the first book, considering how parts of their kind of dynamic and friendship had gone. I like it, definitely. But then we get probably the funniest moment in the chapter here. The Avatar is woken up by the maid. So she just bursts into the room, basically, and is like, Avatar, breakfast. Avatar, oh my. And she walks into the room, and of course, Yangchen is kind of like in a state of undress. And then she notices that, like, Kavik is also in the room. And it's obviously, as is pointed out here, while Kavik was fully clothed, the fact remained that a gentleman caller had slept overnight in the young Avatar's quarters. And again, this is the whole idea they were trying to get across by acting like effectively they were on a date, going through the city before, and then sneaking up in through the window before. And then this, obviously, as we see, is a fully staged scene here. Like, they were meant to be found together in the room here. They want the gossip to be spread here by the maid. And Yangchen just kind of plays it here. Like, she's like, Mistress Guaba, I know what this looks like, but I assure you nothing untoward is going on. Master Boma, my usual guardian, was not able to leave Bin-Ur and sent his grandson, Liu, in his stead to serve as my escort. No, I mean, yes, escort. So you could tell, you know, she's kind of acting a little flustered here with the wording here. And Guaba's like, okay, shall I bring more food for the gentleman caller here? And Yangchen is like, no, this is fine. And the maid is like, you'll share then? And they note the glint in the maid's eye here as this happens. But she's like, please exercise discretion. I wouldn't want my fellow dignitaries getting the wrong idea. But actually, Yangchen does want them getting the wrong idea to be a distraction. Because obviously she knows all the Zongdus basically do a little bit of kind of spy work themselves to get information, to get ahead when they have the business meetings. She wants to walk into this meeting with the main thing that they're all talking about is the fact that Yangchen had this kind of date / gentleman caller the kind of night before. And and in a way also present the idea that Yangchen has chosen to come into the meeting with an assistant who is more of a kind of boyfriend type thing rather than a true kind of like professional assistant as well. So she wants to kind of present the idea that she's coming into this like not in the same level of professionalism as maybe some of the other Zongdus are. So it's extremely well kind of thought out here, and they get across the idea in the narration. The more a story embarrassed a powerful person, the truer it appeared. And so Kavik and Yangchen are just like, yeah, I think this will work. Like, she will spread the news to Iwashi, basically, because of course she's the maid here in Taku. She basically works for Iwashi. He will know by the time we get to the meeting. And so at this point we get the final scene, basically right before they head into the meeting. And she's just like, okay, Kavik, are you ready? Yes. And they kind of walk in. But it is revealed here a little bit that, like, he's maybe not quite ready. He is a bit more nervous than expected, because there is the slight doubt. What if he walks into that room and it becomes clear that Chai-Si knows, like, exactly who he is? Then all of a sudden, it's not just like a bit of a danger for the whole mission that he has been burned and what Chai-Si might do, but also it kind of highlights to Kavik that his kind of trust in his brother over caring about him above all else was wrong. And that's going to be something that hits quite hard. But anyway, Eventually, Yangchen's just kind of like, okay, now would be good, do your job, announce me as we walk in. And so he gets it back into the role. Very fun moment here as well. He's like, the Avatar, master of the elements, bridge between humans and spirits, protector of Bin-Er, defender of Tianhaishi, benefactor of the Taiwan Mountains, healer of the sick, and caretaker of the hungry. And Yangchen is getting super embarrassed at this, and you can see there's a bit of kind of like teasing back and forth as they enjoy the kind of acting performance here. Yangchen's just thinking to herself, go on, add it in, captain of the Western Novice Airball team. Too much. And they're kind of whispering back and forth here because they're also trying to get across the idea that they are this kind of like new couple, constantly like whispering in each other's ears and stuff like that. But they're actually just like kind of having a back and forth about this. He's like, hey, I'm giving you your due. You do good work, you know, bask in the moment, because Kavik's big announcement with all the titles has led to a huge, you know, applause from everyone in the room here as she enters the meeting with the different Zongdus, and she says, you're going to pay for this, and yeah, it's at this moment, right when they see the Zongdus, kind of Kavik freezes a little bit, and yeah, the doubt is kind of coming in a little bit, but it seems like Chai-Si, there was no problem, it seems like. So yeah, we get Zongdu Ashuna of Port Tugak is here. He's probably the least important of them all, of course. They kind of just describe that, like, you know, solid, but, you know, kind of on the verge of retirement is sort of the idea here. So, not a huge power player in all of this. But yes, Zongdu Iwashi, this is technically them meeting him for the first time. It does mention here he is dressed in Kalau silks. Now, that is the Kalau mountain range, which, of course, is the mountain range that includes the Cave of Two Lovers, and thus is close to Omashu, which is where he's from. So, makes sense. Then we get the detail here, and at the far end stood Zongdu Chai-Si. And it's just described that she's relaxed, blank expression on her face, not giving anything away, and it's exactly what Yangchen expected. So, Iwashi welcomes her. Can I call you Zongdu? Basically, because that's what she is. And, you know, it's just the first meeting, you know, I hope we can become friends effectively. They ask, who's this fine young fellow you have with you? And she introduces him as, you know, Master Liu, grandson of my guardian Boma. He will be serving me on this trip. And she notices him have the reaction of just like, haha, I got the information correct, as if like, yes, the rumors have gotten through to Iwashi and they were directly confirmed by Yangchen here. So he feels he has an advantage here going into the meeting. So it's kind of all worked. Chai-Si is just like, okay, attendant, you join the other attendants over there. We'll get down to business. And so, yeah, it seems like Kavik has got through no problem. And Yangchen notes to herself that, my practice of littering misinformation out there has finally paid off, because it's revealed that the reason the whole Master Liu being Boma's family basically works is because she has been relentlessly for a while now sending a bunch of fake messages from Boma to people across the different nations to get across the idea that he has this, what's it described as, a cosmopolitan fake family. So she can use all of these covers for her different agents and stuff like that. So this has worked, but then immediately it pops into her head that this same approach of just sending like false information out there has also, this is what got Q killed. Because of course they gave him a fake letter and he felt that this was an important thing, having a letter from the Avatar, and it basically got him killed in Jondari. So she notes the kind of dangers of this, even though it worked in this situation. So we get to the meeting, we're in a little bit, and Kavik is just kind of talking to Yangchen, kind of whispering in her ear again, like, this is so boring. How have you not murdered someone in broad daylight at one of these things? And she's just like, yep, power of imagination. That's how I do it. Don't actually act it out, just think about it. And it's like, yes, this is what official Avatar business is often like. But it's noted here in the narration, it had actually been worse before Zito, who'd codified procedures that became widely emulated across the four nations. So obviously just kind of more set in stone procedure for how to do this sort of, you know, political running of nations, running of cities and stuff like that situation. To make it just a bit more effective, he made it so it works a bit better, even if it's still somewhat boring. And that's the kind of whole idea here. Again, they note some of the details that are happening here of they're trying to get across the idea that Kavik initially doesn't come across as being basically a professional assistant. All the others are super professional, but Kavik is like glancing at this book of basically how to be an attendant, and they note this, but they're waiting for a moment to kind of for Kavik to actually stand out and impress Zhongdu Iwashi, because they ultimately want to get into a Sparrowbones game. So they have to try and kind of play into the idea of like, okay, how do we get Kavik's skill with like numbers across, the fact that he says some terminology related to Sparrowbones, when will be his opportunity to kind of like strike effectively. And again, you know, there's some details here about, you know, everyone has attendants. Yangchen only has one, Chaisi has two, and the other two Zongdus have a lot more attendants, and all of them are professional. But Chaisi's two attendants are particularly notable because she seems to have them like trained to be super strict with their expressions, where if you just look at them normally, there is no expression whatsoever. But when they talk to Chai-Si, it's super like intense like emotions, lots of facial expressions, and so it's heavy extremes, and so you never know what the nuances are. And I'm wondering, like, is there almost a sense of like, oh, is there some brainwashing almost going on in here as well? But I'm not sure if that is necessarily the intent here. I think it's just she trains, she thinks about all aspects of the game effectively, Chai-Si. Yeah. So show some initiative is what Kavik is being tasked to do. Find an opening to get across yourself well with Iwashi. So then we get to that moment. What is the opening? So it goes on for hours and hours. They're discussing all of this kind of complicated stuff about running cities and stuff like that. And then in the middle of one really long one, Zongdu Ashuna is like, I'm sorry, who is the party in the second part of this clause? Who's it referring to? And Chai-Si, it's revealed that she is the one who's like flagging the least after hours and hours of doing this, highlighting how focused and always on Chai-Si is. And she's just like, it's you, Ashuna. Are you a yay or a nay on this specific topic? And Ashuna's just like, I lost track. We're going to have to start this one over again. And everyone's just like, oh no, it's going to go on even longer. So this is Kavik's chance to shine. He steps up and is like, if I may, the Honourable Zongdu of Port Tugok, based on the previous sums discussed, the order of seniority in which the share agreements are applied, and the voyage success rates in the past 2 years, will achieve with a yay vote a 7 in 10 chance of profiting the equivalent of 5,423 standard ingots of silver, weighed against a 3 in 10 chance of losing 800,667. A tremendous hidden risk masked by a paltry reward. And they're all like, whoa, you kept a running tally as we discussed this? And he's like, yeah, in my head I did, though someone should probably check my calculations. Iwashi's accountants confirmed that Kavik has it completely correct here. And so this kind of gets his attention, of course, and this is where he kind of puts in the Sparrowbones thing. It's just like, Kavik says, please excuse my impertinence. I was only trying to act in good faith. It didn't seem right to let a business partner mistakenly deal into a closed 13 ministers, which obviously is part of the Sparrowbones. And then Iwashi's just like, oh, and Yangchen notices this and is just like, yeah, got him. And they're like, thank you, I appreciate your honesty. And Awashi's just like, ooh, a brain paired with a handsome face. I thought airbenders were supposed to be immune to earthly charms, Avatar, kind of referencing the information he knows and stuff like that. And Yangchen is just like, laugh it up. We're about to rob you blind. But of course, based on the previous chapter, it obviously goes wrong based on what we saw, but there's still, of course, more of the incident to happen. So I think a really, really strong chapter, covers a lot of ground, and not just in terms of the plot. I think some of the kind of internal stuff that is like true and honest between Kavik and Yangchen here, especially like Yangchen's view on kind of what she said to him at the end of the last book, is I think really, really interesting and worth kind of talking about quite a lot. I like that she has a little bit of kind of regret about her approach and how strong it was previously, while still acknowledging that Kavik did betray, of course. Details like, you know, Kavik's faith in Kalyan, but also a little bit of doubt as they go into this kind of crazy situation. And then, yeah, just the kind of humor, the fun aspect of them acting like a couple, basically, kind of throughout the whole thing. It's very, very fun as we kind of go through the whole thing. And one point I actually forgot. I skipped over this going through it. But yeah, when she says like show some initiative, and this is where she kind of gets her revenge for the crazy introduction that Kavik did earlier on, and she knows, like, you know, he says, be aggressive but natural looking. They're completely opposites. How am I meant to do that? And Yangchen just like this, and she like blows in his ear, and he goes like bright red because it's noted here. Everyone noticed. He noticed everyone noticing. He tried to hide by tucking his face into his papers, but his ears glowed like coals over the pages. And Yangchen just kind of like grins at this, leaning into the grin of their what it's called, special friendship. So fun stuff. Was she being a bully? Perhaps, but she never told Kavik taking him back was going to be completely free of punishment. So I think that gives you a sense for where Yangchen is with Kavik. Like, she is ready to kind of like forgive him at this point, pretty much, because like he's going ahead with the mission, but there's obviously still some complexities left. But it's right there, kind of on the verge of being kind of like, you know, these two can kind of go back to normal. But the plot coming into play is quite nice here. I like the details of this, of just like, yeah, now it feels like we're mostly caught up. We just have to see how exactly this all goes so wrong, when they were so confident of just like, got him, to you've just lost like half the funding of Bin-Er in the previous chapter. Like, what's going on here? So yeah, in the comments, let me know what your thoughts were on this chapter. But that has been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.